Everything you need to know about products and services that can improve your life. This is Experts on Call on CL 650.
Don't you listen to what the man said. He said.
And welcome back. This is Experts on Call on CL 650, and I'm Joanne Sutton. Today we're talking about insurance, and joining us in the studio are our resident experts from Intact Insurance, Patrick Magnuson, along with Keith Story and Andrew Tablotny of Laguerre Pelling Insurance. So in this portion of the show, we wanted to really focus on insurance for landlords. Do you currently have a rental property, or maybe you're thinking of getting one or renting out your basement to a student? When it comes to insurance, we're talking about protecting your rented dwelling with confidence. So to establish this conversation, let's talk about what an actual rented dwelling means.
Well, rented dwelling is you've purchased a property, and in most cases it's not likely to be uninsured because you've probably mortgaged it and against your house and or against the property itself. So the bank's going to require you to carry insurance on it. So the real question is to understand what coverage you need on that property.
So it's separate from my house. It's not renting out my basement suite?
No.
Separate building.
Rented condo would be a rented condo policy, but for the most part, we're talking about rented dwellings, a separate house that you purchased as an asset and now are renting out to some other individual.
Okay, so what should I be thinking about as an owner? What is my responsibility versus the responsibility of my tenant? What am I obligated to cover? We got a lot of questions here.
Absolutely. First and foremost, it's your house, so you're insuring that dwelling, and to insure it to an appropriate amount to replace it in the event that it was totally destroyed from an insured loss.
So it's not a lot different than insuring my own home. I just want to insure this dwelling.
Yeah, the difference really, I mean, the building coverage, you're right, is very much the same, and as an insurer, we're going to calculate the replacement cost basically the same way. The difference is going to come into the other extensions of coverage that you would normally have on a homeowner's policy, like your additional outbuildings or contents or additional living expenses. A lot of those things don't apply in a rented dwelling situation, so they're not included within the package because there's no point, as us as insurers, charging premium for an exposure that you don't have. So it's like a bit of a pared down homeowner's policy, if you want to put it into that perspective.
It's building insurance.
Yeah.
What it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Andrew, on behalf of an opinion from a broker, how can a broker actually help the owner understand the coverage in their policy? Well,
there's a lot of differences. Not everything's created equal in terms of coverage, which it needs to be explained to you. The most companies give you what they call replacement cost, and what that means is if you insure the building for $600,000, and it burns down, they will pay $600,000. Whereas on your normal home insurance, if you insured for $600,000 and your building burned down and it now suddenly costs $800,000 for whatever reason, if on a guaranteed replacement cost policy, they would pay the $800,000. So most companies only give you replacement cost. Intact does have, depending on if the house is less than 30 years old or if it's older than that, it's been 100% renovated, they have what's called a comprehensive policy. And a comprehensive policy will give you the guaranteed replacement cost. So we do a normal calculator on the building, which may come out at $600,000. And in the event that if the building should burn down and it now costs $800,000, they would pay the $800,000.
So we now know that an owner needs to have comprehensive coverage. Is this what is meant by all risk?
That's the same term.
That's the same term.
All risk policy basically means that you're insured for everything unless we exclude it, which is different than a named perils policy, which means that you're only covered for the stuff that's specifically named in your policy. So all risk policy is a little bit broader and provides a better coverage.
And Intact provides this?
You bet.
Yes.
Of course you do.
Subject to underwriting.
So what else would you include in that rental insurance package?
Well, we also provide a little bit of additional building coverage. It's sort of included within there, not to the same extent as a homeowner's policy, but there is a little bit of coverage there. There is some coverage for landlord contents. Now, landlord contents are pretty specifically defined as major appliances like your stove and your dishwasher and washing machine, as well as things that are usual to the maintenance of the dwelling, like a lawnmower. If you have a fully furnished rented dwelling, that's a bit of a different exposure. You have to talk to your broker about that one, but it is good to disclose that to your broker because that isn't typically covered under a basic rented dwelling.
Okay,
form.
but the sort of not really permanent fixtures, but
The
washer,
major
dryer.
appliances and things usual to the maintenance of that dwelling, for sure.
Okay.
And there's also, and this is an important one, there's a rental income coverage. Because of course, you bought this as a revenue-generating property. Like Andrew said, you probably have a mortgage on it, so you're hoping that the rent is covering that mortgage. So in the event that you have a loss or that your dwelling isn't habitable, you're obviously not generating any rent from that. So there's coverage for to reimburse you for your rental income.
And also there's a percentage of the building limit that can be used towards an outbuilding. So if you have a standalone garage or shed, and should somebody drive into your garage, there's coverage for that as well.
Excellent.
But just so we're clear, this is on the comprehensive form. A basic rental policy is what we call a fire and extended coverage policy, and then you have to add all these items in. So this policy that Intact offers is a all-encompassing policy to give you maximum protection for under one policy, but it's primarily for, as I say, houses that are 30 years or newer.
Yeah, or if they've been upgraded. Yep.
And one other thing we'll mention too, what I've always liked about the Intact policy is they will protect you against tenant vandalism. So if one of your tenants goes, has a bizarre drug breakdown and decides to rip all the
Or breaks up with his girlfriend and smashes windows, or
right.
Yeah.
So that's included in the coverage.
If your tenant turns sour.
That's the word.
Well, okay, let's talk this great transition into protection. What are some natural protection tips? How can I best protect myself as a rental owner? Is there a checklist to go through, or?
I think one of the most important things that a landlord can do to protect their investment is to draft a lease, obtain all relevant information about the tenants, including driver's licenses, place of where do they work, obtain payment via check, do background checks, follow up with the places where they've lived before. Right?
So it's important to check the references.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as part of your lease is to draft that you're going to check the place on a regular basis. Every Wednesday, every 2 months, every month, preferably monthly, you're going to check it, specifically to address anybody that might be wanting to use your house for purposes other than living there.
Like a grow-up situation, or some other kind of business.
Exactly, and that's likely not to attract somebody that wants to use it for those purposes if you're inspecting it regularly.
Right. So your best way around that is to actually write that in the lease, that I will be surveying the property once a week.
Yeah, somebody who's looking at your house and thinking, I'm going to put a grow up there. If you tell them you're going to come by every month, they'll find a better place.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Well, and just so our listeners are aware, most companies have restrictions on that. They want an inspection done at least every 90 days, by you as the landlord. So it's part of your conditions of your insurance.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So if you can get it in monthly, even better. But you need to make sure that they're aware that you will be stopping by.
Well, I think, it's a big fear of having a rental property is getting is getting the right tenant. It's got to be a big challenge and a big chore, and not everybody is born with common sense. But basically, you've come up with some really good tips about, writing things into the lease so that you have that agreement before they move in. But basically, if something's not right, you just call the police, I guess. Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay. So would there be any other special circumstances when you're not covered in this rental agreement? And if you've got everything written in your lease, is there anything sort of that we haven't spoken about?
Well, I think we touched on the grow ups themselves. And that's specifically loss or damage as a result of a grow up, whether you knew that it was taking place or not, is specifically excluded under the policy.
That's a really good point to know. I wasn't aware of that. Yeah.
And your standard exclusions in your policy would also apply as well. If you're infested by termites, you get mold growing in the walls, your typical things that occur, whether it be a rental house or a house.
Oh, yeah.
The insurance policy is very comprehensive, but it's not all encompassing. It doesn't cover absolutely everything, which some people seem to think it should be. It's not a maintenance policy.
Any tips on, if the need arises, how do you end a bad tenancy?
Consult the Tenancy Act and what your rights are under the Tenancy Act to end that agreement.
And to evict someone.
That doesn't work, Hells Angels.
You're listening to Experts on Call on CL 650. I'm Joanne Sutton. Joining us in the studio today are the insurance experts, featuring Patrick Magnuson and Keith Story, both from Intact Insurance, along with Andrew Tablotny of Laguerre Pelling Insurance. Of course, if you want more information on products and services, please visit the website, intact.ca. And when we come back, we're going to chat more about insurance when it comes to landlord and tenants. We've talked a little bit about being a landlord. We'll talk about insurance, how it applies to tenants in the next portion of this program. This is Experts on Call on CL 650.
There's still more ahead with Experts on Call on CL 650.